Okay, we are back, and that's Mr. John King right over there. Hello, John.
Hey, good morning, Peter.
You bet. Joining us on the phone right now, Speaker of the House.
That's right, Fred Thomas.
How you doing, sir?
Very good. Yeah. But remember, I'm in the Senate, and I serve as a majority leader.
Majority leader. My
Senate Majority Leader.
You can call me whatever you want.
Well, someone gave Peter the wrong envelope. Yeah. It's not his fault. Yeah.
I'll just blame Warren Beatty for that. Mm-hmm. Or Jimmy Kimmel or whatever. So anyway.
Right on.
That's my mulligan for the day. All right.
Well, Fred, we've been chatting a lot about what's going on in the legislature. Let's just catch up. What do you think the highlights are at this point?
Well, I suppose highlights are this, and that's that we got our local schools funded early, which Republicans make a strong commitment to public education, and we want to get that bill through the system and fund them as soon as possible so that the boards throughout the state can negotiate and deal with their faculties and get business going and take care of business in a good way to take care of our local kids throughout the state. Got that done. That's a key bill. That's a huge amount of what we do over there. The rest of the budget, we've worked extremely hard. We got handed a mess when we got there, but we've worked very hard to clean it up. We've reduced a lot of spending in a lot of areas. Everybody's taking a little bit of a haircut. Got some spots to come back and address, but we've put the budget in a position to where we have a ending fund balance that is reasonable, and we have a little bit of revenue we might be able to add to this in the sense of we think that the revenue estimate may be a little bit low. We add that back. It puts us in pretty good shape.
Wait, real quick. Last legislative session, revenue estimates were overblown, according to the legislators. And now you're saying they were undershot revenue estimates?
Well, yeah. So last year 2 years ago, we adopted the Governor Budget's Office higher estimate. They were saying we'd get $300 million in more than the Legislative Fiscal Division. We cut that in half and went to $150 million instead of $300 million. We were still $150 million high, and the Governor's Budget Office overspent by about $200 million last year.
Wow.
And so in the last biennium that we're still technically in. So that. Then we did an estimate in November, the Revenue Committee for the legislature, and we set the numbers at a certain spot. And then since then, the trends in two different measurements are coming in that we're about $90 million short or long. That $90 million more will come in over the next 2.5 years than we thought. So we're going to be very cautious. We won't probably make those adjustments till March sometime, mid-March, late March, when we have another look at the revenue. But for 2 months, a month ago and just last week, the estimates said we were 92 and 93 million short of what was anticipated is now being anticipated. So they're both, all of these numbers, the first one and these two are pretty conservative numbers. We're trying to be very careful because we did shoot long last time. And it's hard to do. I mean, it's hard to get this exactly right.
Well, yeah. Fred, where did this extra revenue come from?
Primarily, it's in the area of corporate income taxes and individual income taxes.
Gotcha. So we paid more taxes. Good, yeah. Good for us.
But it's not by raising taxes. It's just that the revenue's coming in based on the current tax policy of the state.
Right. We performed better, perhaps.
Yeah, or our estimate was a little tiny bit low. But you think of it, I don't know what that $90 million amounts to, but it's not. 3 or 4%, 2% of the whole thing. It's not a lot of money. I mean, but that's how close you got to try and be.
I like hanging out with people who tell me $90 million isn't a whole lot of money. We could be best friends. So I'm curious though. Do you have goals? Like, do you have a chart on the wall? Obviously, everyone has to balance the budget, but there's a question beyond that. Like, how much of a buffer do we have? Honey, what happens if the car breaks down? Sort of scenario. You got a security fund.
Yeah, what happens if the state burns up?
So those are great questions. And so what the governor's had this thing that he's always wanted, this $300 million ending fund balance. He calls it a rainy day fund. We don't have a rainy day fund yet. We are working on establishing one in this session. And so the governor's budget proposal would get you to this $300 million ending fund balance if you raised a bunch of taxes and fees and what have you. With this rainy day fund that we're setting up, though, and I think we did pass it out of the Senate to the House, looks like a pretty good mechanism to use. We will target it, what then I can say is a $200 million ending fund balance or rainy day fund. And the mechanism of it is designed to do this, and that is to say, okay, if we're running short on revenue under what we thought we would have, you can borrow from this rainy day fund. For the first time, the government can do that. In essence, the governor, his budget office. But if you borrow money from it to keep the cash flow correct, then you got to cut $1 of spending. So if you borrow $50 million out of it, you got to cut $50 million.
Wait, this is something you would require the governor or the government to do in going into the future?
Yeah. And so the idea is that we now have thresholds that if we get too low on revenue, what we expect is revenue, there's thresholds. If you go below that, it triggers automatic cuts that the governor needs to cut X amount of money.
Do you tell him where those cuts have to go?
Not when the governor's operating, when we're not in session. So if it gets bad enough,
he might not be able to fly to Missoula for a concert. I mean, horrible things could happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, bad things could happen. True. So that's the kind of thought. Is that, okay, well, I'm not going to fly this month. We'll save a little money here, and we'll save some money there, and we'll save some money over there in transportation, whatever.
Who's that hitchhiking from hell? Oh, that's Governor Bullock. Okay, no, we're up against a break, but there is one question I really wanted to ask you, Fred, and I'm glad because you're in the Senate. I want to ask you about this whole Essman situation that actually got on Rachel Maddow, and everybody made a big deal about the fact we don't want those write-in ballots because the Democrats could win. Anyway, so a little too much voting going on now. So,
right.
So we'll talk about that when we come back.
Definitely, and I just want to throw this opportunity out to everyone. You know, there's a lot of protests going around the country and almost every state, people wanting to hear from their senators, wanting to have town halls. This is a town hall. Yes. This is a guy from your Senate. The Senate Majority Leader is on the air taking questions, 721-1290.
All right, we're going to come right back. The phone's already ringing, Fred, so we're going to come right back with more of Talk Back right after this. And we're back on Talk Back. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And we're talking with the Senate Majority Leader, Fred Thomas. I got it right this time. I got the right envelope.
That's right.
So let's. We do have a caller. So
before we go to Pete's call, because Pete just called in, he can wait just 1 minute.
Okay.
I've got to hear what Fred has to say about this whole mail-in ballot fracas.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I can't really address the ruckus that the state party is talking about, but I know that many of us in the legislature have a great deal of concern about this just jumping into this mail ballot and having an all-mail ballot system all of a sudden. And so think of this. First of all, if you want an absentee ballot today or before, you need to sign a form and send it in, and you have your signature on that, etc. And the ballot's sent to you, and then when they get it back, they compare these signatures. So now and a lot of people do that all over the state. I don't know how much, but 50% of the state. So the rest of everybody, we're just going to send out all these mail ballots with no signatures, as far as I know, because you're not going to request them. They're just going to mail them to you. So what are they going to compare that to? Some old registration card on hand that they don't have anymore, or what have you? So it's very concerning as to how secure this will be when they just mail out all these ballots.
So it sounds to me like this could be something we could shore up. If you want to vote in the special election this year, you need to just come down and put a new signature into the system.
Exactly, but you see, there's not going to be the time to do that. You got to. I mean, these ballots have to be mailed out. Like the governor, when he calls the election, will be like for 90 days. from the point of that he calls it, approximately.
Probably this week, Wednesday or Thursday, 90 days from that point.
Yeah. And so then you have a month and a half to get everybody to come in and sign cards. Not going to happen. So now you're mailing all these ballots out. What's the security for them? And then the liberal organizations last election, just November, they were going door to door and collecting ballots from people, which should be illegal. Because you go to the door and you come to my door and you see a National Review magazine there and you think, well, we'll collect Fred's ballot, but we'll just throw it away because we think he's probably conservative. You go to the next door and they got an ACLU sign hanging there and you think, well, we better get his vote in because they probably vote right.
Fred, do you really honestly think people are doing that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Why are they collecting ballots?
Well, they're trying to get the vote out. The absolute.
No,
when you say absolutely,
they're trying to skew the election. They're trying to skew the election. No, there's no way around.
Do you have any specific proof of that?
Well, of the throwing away accusation, I think is the big charge because that's actually voter fraud.
Sure it is. But how would you ever prove it? If somebody picked up my ballot, I gave it to them, and it never gets turned in, how are you ever going to prove that?
Well, there's a fairly easy way.
You return them by U.S. mail.
You can find out if your ballot was picked up by the processing agency if you go to your My Ballot page. And if someone picked up your ballot and you went to your My Ballot page and it was never
My
collected,
Voter page.
or My Voter page, yeah, then you would know something happened to that ballot before it got to the ballot box.
Yeah, but the point is that how are you going to know it didn't get? I mean, you could say it didn't get turned in, and then you say, "Well, I don't have it." I mean, you go through. Who's going to all do that? The thing is that there's just too much mischief going on in these elections, and what needs to be done is that people need, if they're going to mail ballot, they need to be returned by postage only or hand delivered by the voter themselves to a precinct office or the county courthouse or something. We need to have more security in this whole thing if we're going to go this direction. I'm very concerned about it. That's what I'm concerned about, is security of our election.
You're the Senate Majority Leader, and not Speaker of the House, but maybe occasionally. The question for you, though, is, you said it should be illegal to do the ballot collection runs that have been going on, which I think has been verified in Montana. Do you think that that's something that will come up in the legislature?
I hope so. I hope we passed the Senate out of the House, or we passed the bill out of the House, Senate to the House, that allows for this mail ballot in the congressional election that will be called and held like this June. So I think this issue of security will come up far more significantly in the House, where there's more time to deal with the bill. The bill just surfaced like on Monday, and we sent it out on Friday. It wasn't a lot of the time to deal with the issue as it just presented itself in the Senate.
Well, now, Fred, what is, and this is the term that got bantered about so much, what is a low-propensity voter?
Well, I think that's a voter that only votes seldomly, like 1 out of 4 elections, versus a high propensity is a voter that votes in 3 or 4 out of 4 elections.
Okay, and that's primarily someone who would go to the polling place and cast their vote, right?
Not necessarily. It's someone that just doesn't vote very regularly.
Okay.
Right.
In any kind of voting.
Okay.
Yeah, either way.
Right.
Either way they vote, yeah.
Well, yeah. Let's get Pete's call on before we take a break, and I know Sue's also on the line. So, Pete, you are on with Fred Thomas. Go ahead.
Good morning, Senator. I'm glad to have you on.
Morning, Pete.
2 questions. Where are we at on this, making us more on this gas tax, and also with regard to the raise in college tuition?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah. Good questions, of course. On the gas tax, the bill was introduced that would bump the gas tax by 8 cents. Right now it's at 27.5 cents. This would take it, obviously, up into the 35 area, and that would put us in the higher end of all gas taxes in the country. And what that would do is you would use half of that in general to make up the monies for the highway construction program that is short. We need to fix this, and then the other half would go to local governments to beef up their road construction programs and maintenance for gravel roads in the counties. Now, I don't think that 8 cents is going to fly any way, shape, or form. You might end up with a couple of cents that go to the counties, We're looking at we've done a lot of trimming in the budget in the transportation department, and adjustments there that should take care of the highway construction funds now. And if that holds up, then you don't have a gas tax increase except for counties to beef up the road work that they do. There hasn't been anything really done there in quite a while to expand that funding sector at all. So the jury's out on all of that, except, to me, the jury is not out on having a big gas tax increase happen. I don't think that will at all.
Okay.
Secondly,
go ahead.
If I can, then on tuition for students at the university system. This is an area that's jumping up there right now, currently in the budget. And so we feel that the increase that would be passed on to students to pay right now is too high, because it's in like the mid-20s. And so we think that's too high. We're going to work to get that reduced. Certainly student tuition will go up, but we don't want it to go up, 20-some percent. Half of that, or get it down to the single digits, high single digits, 10-12%. It's been frozen for many years. That's good, but now we may need an adjustment there. Hey, with the revenues down, we've got to make ends meet.
You bet. All right, Senator Fred Thomas joining us. Sue and James both want to get on with you. We're going to come right back with more Talkback. We have one line open, by the way, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. All right, we're back. This is Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Joining us on the phone, the Senate Majority Leader Fred Thomas from Stevensville, right down the road. And let's get right back to the phones. Sue's been waiting the longest. Hi, Sue.
Hey, Peter. How are you?
Groovy. How about you?
I'm good.
A woman with her own radio program, ladies and gentlemen. So, Sue, what's on your mind?
Morning, Sue.
Well, good morning, Senator Thomas. So I'm just wondering who these liberal groups are that you say are going door to door collecting mail-in ballots.
Mm-hmm.
I just would like to know specifically, because I'm an election judge, and I have been trained, and I do know that if someone isn't able to get their ballot, in the elections office will send someone out to pick up a ballot so that it gets voted in time. But I'd like to know specifically, because you always say, the Republicans always say, these liberal groups are going door to door collecting ballots.
I'd like to know. Democrat Central Committee hires them to do that.
That is so not true.
Wait, real quick.
Just represent the Democrat Central Committee.
Can I step in just a second? Okay. So just so we're on the same page. Last election cycle, both Sue and Fred, I don't know. There were a number of stories. One of the big ones came out of Livingston. I'm just reading. This is the news from Livingston. Turning in ballots on behalf of voters is not an illegal activity, but several calls were made to the Livingston Police Department from concerned residents about strangers attempting to turn in their ballots, and has prompted members of Montana political parties to respond. This is just one of the headlines. Livingston was just one of the towns where people were calling in, and they happened in Missoula too, because I talked to our local police department of people collecting ballots. Now, what are the groups? That's a great question. I would guess the League of Conservation Voters was one of those groups, but I'm not sure.
Or the League of Women Voters?
No, the League of Conservation
Voters, okay. So go ahead, Sue.
Well, you can't just go door to door and ask for somebody's ballot.
You can. It's not illegal. That was a question I raised with my police department.
Okay, well, I guess I would like to know specifically, because this has been thrown out there, and sometimes, you throw stuff at a wall and it sticks, but
Sue, it's not just thrown out there. These are newspapers across Montana were reporting on this.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, it's just, and so it's just, the point is that do we allow that, and then do we want to encourage that? And I don't think so. Right now, there's concerns over signatures being able to be checked. You could probably address that better than I can.
Rebecca Connors was on your show last week, and she said that they check every signature against the signature that they have in the elections office.
Sue, if a person has already signed up to get an absentee ballot. In this particular election, that won't happen. Is that right, Fred?
Well, the concern that has been brought to me is that the old registration cards people have signed long ago aren't current, and that either signatures change or they're just not up to date because they're older documents. And do we have the sufficient material to check against? That's a big concern.
Well, you have to be registered to vote in a mail-in election. Yeah,
that's pretty accurate, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
if I signed a card 25 years ago, or let's say 45 years ago, you think they're going to have that?
You have to vote in a presidential election to remain a voter on the voting polls.
So will that be used to check signatures returning ballots? Is that how you would do that?
Sue, he's asked. Yeah.
If you vote in the presidential election every 4 years, and that's the only election you vote in, you remain an active voter on the registration.
What Fred's point is, if you signed your registration card in 1950, okay, and you've been voting in every presidential election since then, chances are the signature that you signed back in 1950 may not resemble what you signed today. Does that make sense?
Well, that would be an older voter, and older voters are really voters that vote.
Okay, but Sue,
I just wanted to.
If we go to a mail ballot election, and I sign my ballot and send it back in, will that be checked against the last presidential election signature I voted in and signed?
I don't know the answer to that question, but
that's his concern.
Rebecca Connors. I will ask her.
Yes,
but I have a question
Sue,
for
real
Senator
quick.
Thomas.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So I'm just wondering what is going on with the Republican nominating convention. I haven't heard anything, and I wondered if you knew.
You mean for the legislature?
For the replacement for Zinke.
Right.
Well,
okay.
I think both parties have had a hard time with this. I don't have
No,
special.
the Democrats haven't had a hard time at all. Theirs is this Sunday.
Well, that's good for you to know all that. You can call a state party chairman. I'm not up on how they're doing that stuff.
And that's only if Zinke is actually put in place.
Yeah.
And so we don't really know until after that happens.
I have tried to call Tim Gould, the executive director, and he won't return my phone calls.
Well, he'll return ours.
Well, I'm not.
Peter, I'll call
yeah, you guys call him.
All right.
I'm not up on that. That's not my.
Thanks for the call.
I'm not on the Central Committee or any of that.
So I went and dug up the story I originally did on this because it was happening in Missoula. So Sue, I hope you're listening. This is Rebecca Connors, the person you were going to get your information from on the last topic. So I think it's valid information. I will read this story when we get back, but the title is Missoula Sees Door-to-Door Ballot Collectors as Election Nears.
Okay, so we're going to come right back. Fred Thomas joining us on the phone. We have, lines are full. 721-1290. Make your point on Facebook, and we will be right back. Okay, welcome back to Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Fred Thomas, you are a very popular guy, sir. All right.
Oh, big time.
So I promised I'd read this just to back up the history here.
Right,
this is from the last election. This is a piece I wrote after speaking with our elections coordinator here in Missoula County, Rebecca Connors. According to Missoula County Elections Administrator Rebecca Connors, many Missoulians have contacted her office to report that people are going door-to-door attempting to collect ballots from voters. Quote, on Monday morning, we received quite a few phone calls from activity that happened over the weekend of voters that had somebody come to their doorstep and ask if they could take their ballots to the elections office on their behalf.
And this was during the presidential election?
Yes. Okay. This is in October, and this is in Missoula. A lot of voters were uncomfortable with this. One voter even called the police. They just felt like something was off, end quote. Connor said she didn't know which groups were behind the ballot collection effort, but says that the tactic pops up primarily during presidential election years and is not illegal. Quote, another person can deliver a ballot on behalf of another. Our office and the Secretary of State's office recommend that voters only give their ballots to someone that they're comfortable with or trust or know. If someone still shows on the SOSMT.gov My Voter page as an active sent status and it's getting close to Election Day, as long as we haven't received it, we can still issue a replacement ballot, void the original, and get them new ones to make sure that they have a vote to cast on Election Day, end quote. So you could see how it would be very hard to gauge necessarily. I mean, if you went to your My Voter page the day before and saw that your ballot actually,
now. Right.
Well, you could go and get a replacement ballot, but there's a lot of hurdles and hoops, and you're going to be waiting in line with a bunch of people getting pizza to come and vote. I mean, it's going to be harder, but there's pizza.
Go ahead, Fred.
No, that's exactly right, and that's our concern. Is that there's just a lot of stuff going on, and then so what's the urge to move to this mail ballot all of a sudden? It is a rush. There isn't going to be
it's money.
Security.
It's money according to the.
There's money. So it's a little bit less expensive, I'm advised, but at the same token, counties can do. These elected administrators are very on top of all this. They know what they're doing, and what many have told me is they can't find the number of people to employ to do the election judges and to do this work. Okay.
Right.
So when I go to my local deal down here, and I love going in and voting on Election Day, that's just me. And a lot of people love getting their ballot absentee. I like going in and voting. Doesn't matter. But when I go in there, it flows very well. And in a low turnout election that we're looking at for Congress, you probably pare back on the the number of people working there. Instead of having 4 crews working 4 precincts, cut it in half and have a crew working 2 precincts. I mean, they know what they need to do 10 times better than I do, but we need to look for economies and make this work, make it less expensive, if it's possible.
Let's get back to the phone. Say good morning to James, you're on Talkback with Fred Thomas. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm going to change topics altogether.
Go for
it. Hopefully that's okay.
Right ahead.
First of all, Senator Thomas, thanks for representing Stevensville. That's where I'm from. I love it.
Oh, good.
I moved to Montana about 8 years ago, and it's definitely become home for me. And what I'm wondering is, I'm an entrepreneur. I like to do my own thing whenever I can. And one of the things I love about Montana is the lack of a sales tax. Makes being a business owner a lot less complicated.
Yeah.
It's nice, but my concern is, I came from Arizona, and it's a big place. They had a sales tax. It was complex per county, per city. It was just a mess. And what I'm wondering is there a threshold that you guys have identified in population and infrastructure where we would get to the point that we couldn't survive without a sales tax, or is that something we haven't even really gone there yet?
I'll tell you what, if you don't mind hanging on, we're up against a break. I'll have Fred answer that when we come back, okay?
All right, cool.
Thanks for the call, and we're going to come back. More with Fred Thomas. We have Karen and Candy, and one line open, at least for a moment. 721-1290, and we'll be right back. Oh, yeah. 721-1290 is the number. The song makes me want to squeeze somebody I don't know. All right.
I'm so glad I know you right now.
Midnight train to Georgia, baby. All right, anyway, welcome back to Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. I'm glad Fred's a friend. He's just going, wow, Peter's weird. But anyway, so I just like that old-time rhythm and blues music. But anyway, that's Fred's joining us now. We just had James ask you about the possibility of getting a sales tax. Is that ever going to happen in Montana?
Well, so 2 things. James asked, is there a point in time with that you need to look at one versus the current tax mechanisms that we have in place today? And so, one, if it's just a traditional sales tax, when I say one, I'm kind of going in steps here. One is that all the sales taxes in the country went into place in the 60s, and they were put in place by Democrat legislatures in general across the country. And it came to Montana in the late 60s, early 70s, and the Montana AFL-CIO flipped on that and went against a sales tax because the governor, Babcock, was proposing one and ran on one. He was a Republican, and it was a political deal, so they flipped on it, and they were able to defeat him and defeat the sales tax in the early 70s. And so it's always been an issue ever since, but the politics of it is kind of flipped in Montana to where Democrats are opposed to it and Republicans see it as a better way of doing tax policy. Some do. So the salient important point, though, is that people don't want to give the government the other tax, we have a property tax, we have an income tax. They don't want to give us the sales tax because they don't trust us. And they think that it would just go up and up and up. You start at low, you reduce other taxes, but then it just creeps up.
This is my concern, yes.
Everybody's seen that, and it's that concern to me is as legitimate as day is long. So that's number one. Number two, though, as the economy changes in America, and to some degree it obviously does in Montana as well, you need to keep your revenue system up to date with what's going on out there. And the fact is that there's shifts from bricks and mortar to the Amazon-style delivery system of goods and potentially some services. And so as this changes and this morphs our economy, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're penalizing the local hardware store trying to compete against Amazon. The local hardware store or local stores in Missoula that are paying property taxes and income taxes in this state, but Amazon, for example, is not. So does that mean you have a sales tax? Not necessarily, but you may have something to keep up with the economy and what's going on. Otherwise, you would continue to penalize local bricks and mortar and delivery systems that are property tax based and income tax based. So that discussion is going on, and I'd have to say that James has the question of the day, because that you'll see this kicked around a good deal by anybody looking at finances for a state. It's no different than finances for a house. You need to keep up with what's going on.
And I think it's also important to note that Democrats are, in Montana, at least now, advocating for sales taxes. Yeah. They just happen to be different ones. They do it under the guise of the gas tax, or under the guise of the bed tax, or under the guise of this.
Tax on prescription marijuana.
They're all sales taxes.
Yep. Wine tax, the governor wants to double that. They're going to propose, bumping the beer tax, which I hope they do that, because I can't wait to defeat that. But we defeated the wine tax. They wanted to double that, and we killed that. And so anyway, James had a good question.
All right, let's move along and get Jamie on the line. Jamie, you also had a question for Senator Thomas. Go ahead.
Hey, Jamie, are you there?
Hello? Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I'm one of the people that they came by for my ballot 3 times. They came.
Wow.
And not only did they want to pick it up, they wanted to come in and help me fill it out.
Did they say who they represented, Jamie?
They were Democrats.
Did they say any particular organization?
No.
They were just caring friends who wanted to help you out.
Right. They were college-age students, and they came in our neighborhood. They dropped them off at the end of the cul-de-sac, and they would walk down both sides of the street and go to everybody's house.
Did they have any sort of identification with them?
They had some paper. I didn't want to talk to them. Okay. I didn't ask those questions.
Okay.
I should have. And next year or next time if they come, I will. But,
and Jamie,
but they were persistent, and they kept coming.
Yeah. How did you feel about? Did you feel that there was something up, or you'd obviously you were concerned about it? I take it.
I was, because they wanted to help me fill it out, and I'm a retired person, and most of the people in our neighborhood are.
Wow.
And I felt they had an agenda of trying to help me fill it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
Thanks for the call, man.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate the call.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move along, and Karen is up next. Karen, you're on with Fred Thomas. Go ahead.
Hi, Senator. Good morning. I just wanted to say that I agree with you totally on the mail-in ballot. To me, voting is a privilege, and the system must be secured. Mm-hmm. And the mail-in, I think, has too many opportunities for misconduct. Why all of a sudden do we need to change the system? It's been working fine up until this point, and so much voter fraud has been identified. Look what happened with Bernie Sanders' votes. That was just unconscionable to all the people who wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders. So I think and also based on Sue's response, I'm not feeling confident on signature verification, because she is an election judge and she couldn't even say that they would verify signatures. So I think
she was able to say the verified signature. She just wasn't sure if they used your signature from your last vote.
I see. Okay. But can we make it illegal to have these people come and solicit ballots?
Well, I think and pick them up. Yeah, I think it's possible that we could do that, and I think that issue will be brought up. We didn't get that in time. This bill popped up in the Senate at a late date, like at the first of this prior week, a week ago, and it went through. The issue has not been brought up in the legislature. It was brought up long before that, in January, because the counties have been asking us to look at this, and I have a fantastic clerk and recorder who's, pushed on this and worked with me and talked to me several times to work, so it's not a new issue to me. But the bill that was to do this was over in the House, and all of a sudden another bill popped up in the Senate and came through, and that's one issue that potentially could be addressed in the House now, because the Senate bill is in the House.
Okay, Karen, we're up against a break, okay?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the call. So we have Candy and Shirley and a line open for Senator Fred Thomas. We'll be right back after this 1-minute timeout. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And, of course, Fred Thomas joining us from Stevensville.
Fred, I want to say a special thank you to you for letting us talk about something besides the Oscars, which I didn't watch.
Right.
I did watch the highlight reel this morning. But.
It was very entertaining, especially toward the end. Those of you who turned it off once the gal said La La Land, and you missed all the fun of the craziness going on stage. Oh, it's somebody else. It was just delicious to me. I just thought it was great because it's live and there's nothing they can do about it. Anyway, so go ahead.
It looked like their faces, everyone in Hollywood's face looked exactly like it did the night that Hillary Clinton didn't win the election. They were just shocked. They didn't understand what was going on.
It was a very sad day. All right, so let's get back to the phone. And Candy has been waiting the longest. Hi, Candy. Go ahead.
Yes, Fred, I totally agree with you about this mail-in ballot. The last time I gave a signature was 21 years ago, to the best of my belief, and I have had nerve damage in my right hand, and so my signature shouldn't match up with anything else now. It's, and then my husband just told me that a friend of his that's handicapped, they came to him to get his ballot, and he didn't even ask who they were. So, and by the elections run in Missoula here, I think there's a lot of voter fraud. Thank you.
Well, you think about, yeah.
All right, let's go ahead.
Go ahead. You guys, you got some questions to...
We certainly do. We got the more callers. So, Shirley,
Candy made a great point.
You bet. You're up with Fred Thomas. Go ahead, Shirley.
Oh, I agree with the write-in voter, too. I think it's not a good, safe way. If you don't care enough to go to the poll to vote, you shouldn't be voting. So even handicapped people have ways of making that happen, and the U.S. mail is available to everybody, even the most shut-in person. So my question is about, is there any examination happening as to how and where the governor spent all the money that made this deficit situation? That's one question. And the other question is, what is happening with the ending daylight savings time? Oh, I want that gone so bad.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for the call. Go ahead, Fred.
So two things. First of all, on spending. While the governor's overspent about $500 million in his first term of office, the money was spent in spots that were authorized by the legislature. So some will say, well, that's an oxymoron, one or the other, but it's true what I said. And why it's true is that, and particularly his last 2 years, if the governor had came in when we saw revenues softening and coming down, we felt that it would have been a great time to come in and just start, trimming things. You don't, just holding back on spending where he can, and holding it up. I mean, we all can do that in our own budgets, and so can the governor, authorized to do that. And so the governor did not spend any money incorrectly that I have any idea of at all. What he didn't do was hold back the reins when the revenue started softening. And if that had been done, I think it would have really helped this session that we're in this budget session. Secondly, on daylight savings time, we had a bill in the Senate to eliminate that, and that bill passed the Senate handily and went to the House. Now that issue is in front of the House, and of course, if the House passes that bill, in general, exactly the same way as it was in the Senate, then it would go to the governor for his consideration.
Real quick, I know we won't get very many callers in, if any, after this point because we're so late in the show. But Dave called in and he told me that he spoke with people in 2012, and he said that he noticed they were picking up ballots in his neighborhood, and that they were from the group Acorn, which is kind of defunct after some revelations during that year.
Okay.
Question for you though: have you seen anything about this Robin Hood bill making its way through the House? I spoke with Ron Eli earlier on in the week about administrative pay across Montana.
And I'm not sure by the Robin Hood
acronym. This is what he's calling House Bill 489, which deals with oversight pay for state administrators.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern, whether that bill is exactly correct or not, the biggest concern is that we just have too much discretion handed out to the departments and the bureaus across state government in Montana. And so we do have legislation in this session. We passed it from the Senate to the House just before we left that dials this in and strengthens this and puts any adjustments in movement in positions from wherever one is to a supervisor or bureau chief. All those things would be then under the authority of the Department of Administration and therefore the budget director. Now, while we might be in love or in love with the budget director, et cetera, it doesn't matter. This authority needs to be centralized in state government to control this. And so this is part of the answer, a significant part of the answer, and it's one of the best bills we'll have, is the one that centralizes this control of movement of upgrades in pay.
And with that, Fred, we are completely out of time. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure to be with you guys always.
You bet. Our apologies to our other callers. I believe we may have a representative from U of M tomorrow, but it could just be open phones. Have a great day, everybody.